It was supposed to be my small victory. After months of saving, planning, and swearing at unhelpful contractors, I finally rebuilt my garage, the one that had collapsed during last winter's storm. Fresh concrete floor, automatic doors, bright LED lighting, even a wall-mounted EV charger I didn't technically need but wanted anyway. It smelled like new paint, cedar, and quiet satisfaction. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud of a project that went exactly as planned. That feeling lasted roughly 3 hours. Around 10 p.m., a set of headlights swept across my driveway, followed by the slow crunch of tires over fresh gravel. My security camera pinged on my phone, and I watched in disbelief as a white BMW sedan nosed into my newly rebuilt garage like it owned the place. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Karen, the woman from 2 houses down. HOA vice president, professional gossip, and full-time control enthusiast. She looked around, apparently pleased with herself, then grabbed her purse, locked her BMW, and strolled away toward her house as if nothing about this situation was remotely strange. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. Maybe she'd mistaken it for her own? Except her garage was a single car unit with peeling paint and a broken door she refused to fix because the HOA budget should cover it. Mine was brand new, glowing like a showroom. There was no way she could have confused them. I walked outside, trying to keep my temper from boiling over. Her BMW sat perfectly centered on my spotless floor, like a smug guest refusing to leave. I texted her, politely at first. "Hey Karen, just noticed your car's in my garage. All good? Must have been a mix-up." 2 blue check marks appeared. Then nothing. I called. Straight to voicemail. By morning, the car was still there. I had to park my truck in the driveway like some kind of commoner, which, apparently, was against the HOA's aesthetic standards. I knew she'd report me for that before I even had breakfast. Sure enough, at 9:04 a.m., an envelope from the HOA appeared on my porch, hand-delivered. Inside, a violation notice for improper vehicle storage visible from the street. Signed, of course, by Karen herself. That's when I realized this wasn't an accident. When I confronted her later, she gave me that patronizing smile only people like her have perfected. "Oh, I just needed somewhere safe to park," she said. "There was oil leaking in my garage, and you weren't using yours yet, were you? It's just temporary." "It's my property," I said, trying to stay calm. She waved dismissively. "Oh, relax. It's all HOA property technically. Shared community assets." That was such an impressive lie I almost applauded. The HOA maintained lawns and fences, not private garages. She knew that, but Karen's favorite hobby was rewriting reality to match her convenience. When I threatened to have her car towed, she smiled again. "Go ahead. But the HOA would consider that harassment. And since I'm vice president, that's a serious claim." It was one of those moments where you realize exactly how far someone's entitlement can stretch. She wasn't just parking in my garage. She was testing boundaries, seeing if I'd cave like everyone else in the neighborhood. Most people did. Karen had a way of weaponizing politeness. But I'm not most people. That evening, I installed a smart garage controller. One of those Wi-Fi systems that lets you open or close the door remotely. I waited until midnight, checked the camera feed, and watched her BMW sitting smugly under my ceiling lights. I tapped close. The door came down with a soft hum, sealing her car inside. Next morning, I found her on my porch, fists clenched. "You locked my car in." I took a sip of coffee. "No, I locked my garage. Your car just happens to be inside it." "That's illegal," she snapped. "So is trespassing." She huffed, muttered something about calling the board, and stormed off. An hour later, I got another HOA notice, this one accusing me of obstructing community access. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. But the real fun began that weekend. My neighbor across the street, Mark, caught her sneaking around my driveway with a clipboard, taking photos. He texted me, Pretty sure she's building a case file. Sure enough, she presented her evidence at the next HOA meeting, claiming I'd unlawfully confined her vehicle and that my behavior posed a safety risk to the community. I calmly pointed out that her car was parked inside my legally titled property, and if she wanted to file a police report, I'd be happy to explain the situation to them. She backed off, but only slightly. I could see the twitch in her jaw, the one people get when they're not used to losing control. That's when she changed tactics. The next morning, I found her BMW gone. I thought maybe she'd finally given up. But then I noticed the scuff marks on my driveway and the faint smell of burnt rubber. My security footage confirmed it. She'd hired a tow truck at 3 a.m. to drag her own car out of my closed garage. Fine, I thought. That chapter's over. Except it wasn't. That afternoon, a city inspector showed up. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint about unlicensed construction activity and potential code violations during my garage rebuild. He said the report mentioned unsafe electrical work and zoning infringements. I invited him in, showed all the permits, and even offered coffee. He was apologetic. "These things happen," he said. "We get anonymous tips all the time." I didn't need a detective to guess who the anonymous tip was. By that evening, Karen had parked her BMW halfway across my driveway, close enough that I couldn't open my garage door without scraping it. I sent her another text. "You're blocking my access again." She replied this time. "You can still squeeze by. Don't exaggerate." That's when I realized she wasn't just trying to inconvenience me, she was escalating, daring me to lose my cool, so she could paint me as the problem. So I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just smiled, waved to the camera, and documented everything. 3 days later, I called the towing company used by the HOA itself for unauthorized vehicles. The same one she'd arranged to move her car. I sent them the footage and HOA bylaws stating no vehicle may obstruct driveways or access points. They towed her BMW while she was at brunch. When she came back, she screamed loud enough to wake the neighborhood dogs. "You had no right." "Actually," I said, holding up the HOA rulebook she'd helped write, "you're in violation of Section 3.2. I just enforced it." She stomped away, shouting something about revenge. And knowing Karen, revenge would come soon. But what I didn't realize yet was just how far she'd go, and how completely it would backfire on her. Because the next escalation wouldn't involve just my driveway. It would involve her trying to seize control of my entire property, using the HOA, the city, and a web of lies that would ultimately unravel spectacularly. And I was ready to play the long game. I knew Karen wouldn't let the matter rest. She thrived on control, and losing even a minor battle, especially in front of witnesses, wasn't something she could stomach. The next morning, she didn't storm over or send a furious text. No, that would have been too direct. Instead, she smiled at me from her front yard like nothing had happened, trimming her already perfect rose bushes. That was her tell. When Karen was smiling, it meant she was planning something. By midweek, the first ripple appeared. I received a formal letter from the HOA board claiming that my recent construction may have exceeded approved architectural guidelines. The letter didn't specify what that meant. It was vague enough to cover anything but threatening enough to make most people panic. I didn't panic. I made coffee, sat on my porch, and reread it with amusement. The concerns, according to the attached note, included garage lighting that may produce visual disturbance to neighbors, inappropriate exterior paint shade, and my favorite, potential misuse of the space inconsistent with residential zoning. It was bureaucratic poetry, vague, pompous, and clearly ghostwritten by someone with a vendetta. So I took photos. Detailed, time-stamped, well-lit photos of every corner of my garage and sent them in response. I also copied the city's inspection approval and my contractor's signed compliance report. It was my polite way of saying, try harder. A day later, I got a curt email from the HOA president, A mild-mannered man named Roger who usually avoided conflict like it was contagious. "We'll review your documentation," he wrote, "and get back to you." His tone was hesitant, almost apologetic. Translation: he knew Karen was behind it but didn't want to cross her. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. That weekend, while mowing the lawn, I noticed Karen standing in her driveway, chatting with 2 other residents. Every few seconds, she'd glance in my direction and lower her voice dramatically, like she was leaking state secrets. That was her favorite move: weaponized gossip. By Sunday evening, 3 neighbors had approached me, just out of curiosity, about whether my garage was being used for commercial storage. I played dumb. Commercial storage? No. Unless you count my toolbox and a few spare parts. One of them chuckled nervously. "Oh, you know how rumors start." I did. They started with Karen. By Monday morning, I'd had enough. I wasn't going to play defense forever. So, I invited the entire HOA board, Roger included, to come inspect my garage in person. "Let's clear this up once and for all," I said in the email. "Bring whoever you like. I'll even provide refreshments." They showed up Thursday afternoon. Roger, 2 timid board members, and, of course, Karen in oversized sunglasses like she was attending a celebrity scandal. I greeted them politely, opened the garage, and gestured toward the spotless interior. "Behold the alleged crime scene." Roger peered inside, visibly uncomfortable. "Everything looks fine." Karen stepped forward, scanning every inch. "Well, I still think the paint is too bright," she said. "It's the exact shade the HOA approved," I replied. "Same code as yours." She squinted. "Mine's cream." "So is this." "It doesn't look like it." "Maybe it's the lighting," I said, grinning. "You know, the visually disturbing kind." Roger coughed into his hand to hide a laugh. "I think we're done here," he said. Karen's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. When they left, I knew I'd scored another small victory. And I also knew that small victories made Karen furious. Sure enough, that night I heard the faint clatter of metal outside. I opened my security app and checked the camera feed. There she was, Karen, standing by my garbage bins with her phone flashlight, taking photos of my side yard like some suburban paparazzo. I stepped outside and said calmly, "Lose something?" She jumped, nearly dropping her phone. I was checking for property line encroachments." "At midnight?" She straightened. "I'm within my rights to inspect common areas." "Funny, because that's my private property. Want me to call the sheriff to help you finish your inspection?" She turned on her heel and stomped away, muttering. By morning, a new anonymous complaint had appeared in my inbox, this time alleging improper waste disposal. Apparently, someone claimed I was leaving hazardous materials near my bins. I forwarded the email to Roger with a note. "Since my hazardous material consists of banana peels and coffee grounds, I'll assume this is another mistake." Roger called me later, sounding weary. "Look, between you and me, she's been active lately. Maybe just try not to engage." "I'm not engaging," I said. "I'm documenting." That word, documenting, changed the tone. He sighed. "All right. Just keep everything civil." I intended to. Civil, but precise. A week passed without incident. I thought maybe she'd finally exhausted herself. Then one morning, as I backed out for work, I noticed her BMW parked exactly at the edge of my driveway again, not blocking me entirely, just close enough to make turning difficult. Subtle harassment. I took photos, time-stamped, then went to work. When I returned that evening, it was still there. I decided to take the scenic route, literally. I drove around the block, parked on the opposite curb, and walked over casually. Karen was watering her lawn. "Hey," I said pleasantly. "Your car's close to my driveway again." "It's public street parking," she said, without looking up. "True," I replied. "But blocking access is still a violation under city code. I can show you if you'd like." She smiled that tight smile again. "You wouldn't dare call the city." Wouldn't need to. I already did last time you parked across the sidewalk. You remember, the warning on your windshield. Her expression faltered for half a second. Then she said coldly, "You're making enemies you don't need." "I'm making a point," I said, walking away. That's when the real escalation began. A few days later, I got home to find bright orange paint sprayed across my garage door. Not graffiti, just a single word: selfish. It was almost comical, half-hearted vandalism with emotional undertones. My security camera didn't catch her face clearly, but it caught her outline, her posture, and the unmistakable way she held her phone in front of her like a mirror. I filed a police report. The responding officer was polite, maybe even amused. "You sure you don't want to just wipe it off?" he asked. "Oh, I will," I said. "After I get a copy of the report." I didn't clean it immediately. I left the word there for 2 days. Long enough for everyone in the neighborhood to see it. Then, when people started whispering, I printed out the still frames from my security footage and taped them to my garage door under a sign. "Vandalism in progress. Smile for the camera." By morning, the sign was gone. Someone had peeled it off carefully. But the message was delivered. Karen stopped smiling when she saw me after that. Then, 2 weeks later, I received a certified letter from a local law firm. Inside was a notice of intent to pursue civil damages for emotional distress. The complainant? Karen. The claim? That my behavior, surveillance practices, and harassment had caused her significant emotional suffering and humiliation in the community. I almost laughed out loud. She was suing me for catching her vandalizing my property. I called the number listed on the letter. The attorney sounded young, nervous. Yes, my client, Ms. Parker, feels she's been unfairly targeted." I interrupted. "Has she shown you the footage?" He hesitated. "Footage? I'll email it to you. And a copy of the police report." He didn't respond, but the case evaporated 2 days later. By now, Karen had lost the subtle war. She switched to open hostility. Her next move was calling for a special HOA meeting to vote me out as a member in good standing. Basically, it was her way of trying to revoke my right to vote in community matters. I showed up early, dressed neatly, calm, polite. Karen arrived late, dramatically, clutching a stack of papers like evidence in a trial. She launched into a speech about community harmony and disruptive personalities. When she finally finished, I stood and said, "May I show the board something?" I connected my laptop to the projector. Footage of her BMW in my garage, her photographing my bins, her vandalizing my door. The room went silent. Roger rubbed his forehead. "Karen, this is serious." She stammered. "That's not, you can't prove that's me." "I don't have to," I said. "The police already did." She tried to recover, but the board voted to suspend her from her vice president duties, pending review. It was the gentlest way possible to say, "You're done." But people like Karen don't go quietly. That night, as I sat in my driveway, enjoying the rare peace, I saw her porch light flick on. She stood there, staring at me for a long time. No shouting, no words, just that burning stare of someone plotting their next move. I knew that look well. The war wasn't over. It was only about to get louder, uglier, and far more public. Because Karen was about to take the conflict out of the neighborhood and into City Hall itself, and she didn't yet realize she'd be dragging herself straight into her own downfall. The silence lasted all of 2 days. For a brief, beautiful moment, I thought maybe Karen had finally learned her lesson, that the humiliation of being suspended from her beloved HOA throne would humble her. But humility wasn't part of her vocabulary. When control slipped through her fingers, she didn't reflect, she retaliated. The first sign came on a Tuesday morning when a city code enforcement truck pulled up in front of my house. A young inspector stepped out, clipboard in hand, wearing that apologetic look of someone sent into a situation they didn't fully understand. "Mr. Harris?" he asked. "That's me. Got a complaint about an illegal structure on your property. I nearly laughed. Let me guess, my garage? He blinked. Actually, yes. I sighed and gestured toward it. Come on then. Let's save you the trouble. The inspection lasted 15 minutes. Everything was spotless, legal, and over-inspected at this point. He checked my permits, took photos, even admired the electric wiring. When he finally closed his clipboard, he said, "I'm sorry. It's clear everything's up to code. We get colorful complaints sometimes." "Let me guess again," I said. "The complaint came from someone named Karen Parker." He hesitated, then smiled carefully. "We can't disclose that." "Of course not," I said, smiling back. He left. I waved pleasantly at Karen, who stood on her porch pretending to sweep. By evening, she was back at it. This time, she called the fire department to report hazardous materials being stored on the premises. I was grilling steak in the backyard when the fire chief himself walked up, confused but polite. "Sir," he said, "we received a report about possible flammable liquids in your garage." "Only gasoline," I said, opening the door, "in the tank of my truck." He peeked inside, nodded, and chuckled. "You got a neighbor problem, huh?" "You have no idea," I said. He left me with a sympathetic nod. That was the day I realized Karen wasn't just trying to annoy me, she was trying to bury me under bureaucracy. And if she couldn't find something real, she'd manufacture it. But here's the thing about people like Karen. They're relentless, but they're predictable. They never consider that someone might outplan them. So I decided to let her escalate, and I'd quietly document every step. By Friday, the mail brought a new letter. This time, not from the HOA or the city, but from the Department of Transportation. It accused me of unauthorized modification of a curb access point. I almost choked on my coffee. She had actually reported my perfectly normal driveway as if I'd built an illegal entrance to a highway. I called the DOT number listed. A confused clerk answered. "Sir, this claim seems unusual. Did you pave a new road or something?" "Nope," I said. "Just own a driveway." "Apparently, that's a federal concern now." The clerk laughed. "We'll close it out. Sorry for the trouble." I thanked her, then checked my security footage again that night. There she was, Karen, standing on the sidewalk with a tape measure, taking photos of my driveway entrance at 11:45 p.m. It was pure comedy at this point. But she wasn't done. The next move was her boldest yet. Saturday morning, a new flyer appeared on everyone's porch in the neighborhood. Community notice. Concerns have been raised regarding unauthorized property modifications and potential safety hazards involving the Harris residents. Please remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity to the HOA. At the bottom, in small print, issued by Acting Community Liaison Karen Parker. Acting? She'd made herself a title again. I picked up the flyer, shook my head, and walked across the street to Mark's house. Mark had been watching the circus unfold from day one. "She's unhinged," he said after reading it. "Want me to call a board meeting?" "No," I said. "Not yet. I have a better idea." That afternoon, I made some calls. To the city's community relations office, a journalist friend, and a lawyer. By evening, I had a plan. If Karen wanted to drag my property into public view, I'd make sure the public actually saw the truth. The next week, I put up a sign right by my driveway. "This property is fully code compliant. Inspected, permitted, and approved. Documentation available upon request." Underneath, I added, "If you have questions, contact the City Code Department, ask for Officer Jenkins." Jenkins was the inspector who'd cleared my garage. He found it hilarious when I called to warn him. "Honestly," he said, "it'll save us both time. She's already filed 3 more reports since last week." 3? I asked. "Yeah. Noise violation, structural instability, and, get this, illegal commercial operation." "What are you running, a warehouse?" "Just a garage," I said. But maybe I should start charging rent. That got a laugh. The sign had the desired effect. Neighbors started asking questions, not about me, but about Karen. People were tired of her antics. The elderly couple next door, who'd always been polite but quiet, started openly rolling their eyes when she walked by. Mark began documenting her too, with his own camera. She noticed the shift. You could see it in her posture. Her smile looked more forced, her voice sharper, her movements more performative. Entitlement mixed with desperation. She needed to regain control fast. So she found a new target, my contractor. She called the city licensing office to claim he'd used unlicensed workers. Then she called his supplier to say his job site was under investigation. It almost worked, until I intervened, providing every invoice and permit to clear his name. He was furious. That woman cost me half a day of work and my sanity, he told me. You sure you don't want to press charges? Not yet, I said. I want her to build her own gallows first. That phrase stuck with me, because that's exactly what she was doing. The following weekend, I received an invitation to a special city planning session regarding residential compliance and community standards. The meeting was open to the public. The name on the request? Karen Parker. She'd filed a citizen's petition to discuss rampant unregulated construction in our subdivision. I knew she'd use that meeting to try to humiliate me publicly. What she didn't know was that I'd already spoken to the city planner, who had all my documentation on file and was more than a little annoyed by her. The meeting was held in the community center gym. Maybe 30 people showed up, mostly out of curiosity. Karen was at the front, armed with her binder and a PowerPoint presentation labeled Neighborhood Safety Concerns. She started with dramatic flair. We, as responsible homeowners, must protect our property values and ensure all structures meet community expectations, she said, gesturing at a photo of my garage projected on the screen. Some residents believe they can build whatever they like, flaunting rules that the rest of us respect. I raised my hand. Question. She froze. This isn't a Q&A yet. Oh, I think it should be, I said, standing. Especially since that's my property on your screen. Whispers spread through the room. Karen stiffened. Yes, and we're using it as an example of how oversight can fail. Good point, I said. Maybe we should ask the oversight authority, who happens to be here tonight. I nodded to the city planner sitting near the back. He stood up, looking annoyed. Everything on that property has been inspected and approved, multiple times, by my department. The silence that followed was delicious. Karen blinked rapidly. Well, perhaps they were misled. The planner frowned. Ma'am, you filed 6 separate complaints. All of them baseless. We've documented the pattern. Continuing this could be considered harassment. Her jaw dropped. Harassment? I'm protecting the community. From what? I said. A garage door that opens too smoothly? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even Roger, the HOA president, chuckled. Karen's face flushed bright red. You think this is funny? You're destroying our neighborhood's reputation. I walked to the front, keeping my tone calm. Karen, you've filed false complaints, vandalized my property, and harassed contractors. You've wasted taxpayer resources and embarrassed yourself in front of the board. I've been patient, but this stops now. She tried to speak, but the city planner cut her off. Ms. Parker, you're officially warned. Any further false filings will result in legal action, and we'll be notifying your HOA of this behavior. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The meeting ended shortly after, but the damage was done. Neighbors avoided her. The HOA board stopped returning her calls. Even Roger, ever diplomatic, refused to entertain her urgent matters. For the first time since moving into this neighborhood, the power shifted. But Karen wasn't finished yet. She still had one last card to play, one that involved twisting every regulation, every favor, and every ounce of petty influence she still had. because if she couldn't destroy my garage legally, she'd find another way. And she'd soon discover that in trying to burn me down, she'd set fire to her own reputation, her own standing, and, eventually, her own car. That, however, was a scene I couldn't have scripted better if I tried. The next phase of Karen's campaign didn't begin with noise or confrontation, it began with silence. The kind of silence that feels too deliberate. Her curtains stayed drawn. Her lawn, normally her pride and joy, went untrimmed for a week. Even her BMW, once her mobile shrine to status, sat unmoved in her driveway. For most people, this would signal retreat. For Karen, it was reconnaissance. She wasn't surrendering, she was strategizing. I should have known that calm meant something worse was coming. It started subtly. I received a letter from my home insurance company stating they'd received an inquiry about whether my property contained non-permitted modifications. They didn't name the source, but I didn't need Sherlock Holmes to guess. Karen had apparently called my insurer directly, pretending to be a concerned neighbor worried about liability risks. The company wasn't taking action yet, but the letter asked for confirmation of my permits, which, thankfully, I had filed neatly in a binder labeled Karen-proof documentation. I sent them scanned copies with a note, all up to code. Persistent false reports from a neighbor have been filed, please document accordingly. That seemed to close that chapter. Or so I thought. The real blow landed 3 days later. I came home from work to find a bright orange sticker slapped on my garage door. Notice of investigation, you do not use structure. For a split second, I thought it was another one of her pranks. But it looked official. I called the number printed on it, and a city clerk explained, someone filed a formal safety complaint claiming the roof was unstable and you'd been warned before. We're required to tag the structure pending inspection. Warned before? I asked. By who? She hesitated. It's anonymous, but the complaint mentioned your previous inspections. That was the moment I realized Karen had escalated from petty nuisance to full-on sabotage. She was using city bureaucracy as a weapon. The inspection was scheduled for the next morning. I barely slept, too angry to relax. When the inspector arrived, it was the same guy as before, Officer Jenkins. He looked exhausted. I'm sorry, Mr. Harris, he said. We have to follow procedure. I nodded. You'll find it's the same as last time, only cleaner. He smiled faintly. Honestly, I believe you. Sure enough, within 20 minutes, he declared everything structurally sound. I watched him peel off the orange sticker himself. I'll mark this complaint as false. Again. Thanks, I said. Can I ask how many of these she's filed total? He exhaled. 9. In 3 weeks. You're not the first person she's done this to, but you're definitely the one she's obsessed with. Good to know, I said. That afternoon, I wrote an email to the HOA board summarizing every false report, attaching copies of the city's clearance letters, police reports, and even screenshots of her vandalism. I ended it with, if the HOA continues allowing one of its members to weaponize the board's authority for personal harassment, I'll have no choice but to involve my attorney. Roger called within the hour. We've been talking about it, he said carefully. The board agrees this is out of hand. So, we're drafting a motion to remove her entirely. HOA membership suspension. I leaned back in my chair, savoring that sentence. Good. The meeting was set for the following Friday. But Karen got wind of it early, and that's when she unleashed her masterpiece of chaos. Thursday evening, I returned home to flashing red and blue lights. 2 police cruisers were parked in front of my house. I froze. My stomach dropped. For a moment, I thought something catastrophic had happened, an accident, a break-in, something real. An officer approached me. Are you Mr. Harris? Yes. Sir, we received a report of an altercation involving a firearm. What? He held up his notepad. Caller stated she saw you waving a gun at a neighbor during an argument over property lines. I was too stunned to even speak for a second. Then I exhaled sharply. You're kidding. That's completely false. The officer nodded slightly. That's what we figured. But we have to check. I invited them in, showed my garage, my security footage, my empty hands. They reviewed everything and quickly realized it was another bogus report. The senior officer sighed. She's abusing 911. We'll file a report for false claims. You want to press charges? Not yet, I said. Let's make sure she hangs herself with her own rope first. He grinned. Fair enough. When the squad cars finally left, the whole neighborhood was watching. Curtains twitched, lights flicked on, and across the street, Karen stood on her porch with her arms crossed, feigning innocence. I didn't say a word to her, just smiled. The next day at the HOA meeting, the air was electric. Word had spread about the police visit, and people were divided. Some still believed Karen's narrative, others were finally realizing how deep her manipulations ran. The room was packed. Roger opened with his usual formality. We're here to discuss ongoing disturbances and misuse of HOA authority. Karen jumped in immediately. Before you start, I have evidence. This man has been hostile, threatening, and disruptive to community harmony. She slammed a binder on the table, filled with printed photos and emails. Roger frowned. Ms. Parker, these are the same photos you submitted before. They're proof of his pattern, she snapped. He's dangerous. I raised my hand calmly. Permission to respond? Roger nodded. I opened my own folder and slid a printed page toward him. This is the police report from last night. The one documenting her false 911 call claiming I had a firearm. There's also a note from Officer Jenkins confirming her 9 false complaints to the city. The room went silent. Karen's expression faltered. That's not accurate. I was scared for my safety. Funny, I said. You were standing on your porch recording video the whole time. Want me to show it? A murmur spread through the crowd. Roger leaned back, clearly done playing mediator. Ms. Parker, this is beyond inappropriate. The board moves to suspend your privileges effective immediately, pending permanent removal. Her face turned crimson. You can't do that. You need a full vote. You'll get one next week, he said. But for now, consider yourself relieved of duty. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The moment she left, half the room exhaled in relief. One older neighbor muttered, "About time." Afterward, Roger pulled me aside. "I'm sorry it got this far. She's been volatile. We'll handle it." I nodded. "Just make sure she doesn't handle it again." I thought that was the end. It wasn't. 2 nights later, around midnight, my motion sensor lights flared on. I checked the camera feed and froze. Karen was back. Her BMW was idling in front of my driveway, engine humming softly. She got out, holding a gas can. My pulse spiked. I called 911 instantly. The dispatcher's voice stayed calm. "Stay inside, sir. Units are on the way." Karen didn't pour anything. She just stood there, staring at my garage door, gripping the can like a threat she couldn't quite commit to. Then, when she saw my lights turn on, she dropped it and fled to her car. The police arrived within minutes. They intercepted her at the end of the street. She tried to talk her way out, said she was returning a borrowed can, but the body cam footage and her prior record made that excuse crumble fast. They found the gas cap unscrewed and residue on her glove. They arrested her for trespassing and intent to vandalize property. Watching the flashing lights reflect off her BMW as they handcuffed her was, strangely poetic. When the officers left, I stood in my driveway, the night air cold and still, and realized just how far things had spiraled. A simple garage rebuild had turned into a suburban war zone. But for the first time I felt the balance truly shift. She'd crossed a line she couldn't charm her way back from. The next morning, news spread like wildfire. The same neighbors who once whispered behind curtains now stood openly on lawns, swapping stories about Karen's meltdowns. Someone even posted footage of her arrest to the local Facebook group. The comments were brutal. "Finally," one said. "She's been terrorizing this place for years." Roger called again. "She's officially banned from all HOA functions. The board voted unanimously this morning. You're clear." "Good," I said. "Maybe now we can have some peace." But the story didn't end with her arrest. Because Karen's BMW, the one she'd treated like a sacred idol, was impounded. And a week later, when the police released it, something strange happened. They discovered inside her trunk a stack of forged HOA letters, official-looking, complete with signatures copied from board members, all aimed at harassing various neighbors. Forgery, fraud, criminal impersonation. When the city investigators traced the printer and matching paper stock back to her home office, they found dozens more documents, drafted complaints, fake notices, even a template labeled "Future Violations," to be customized. It was her entire career of pettiness laid bare in black and white. By the end of the month, she'd lost her vice presidency, her reputation, and, ironically, her homeowner's insurance. No company wanted to touch someone with pending fraud charges. I rebuilt that garage to store tools and my truck. I hadn't planned on it becoming a courtroom exhibit or a symbol of karmic justice, but life's funny like that. Still, I didn't celebrate. I just kept living my quiet, methodical life, because I knew people like Karen never really disappear. They just lie low, waiting for the next opening. And sure enough, one was already forming. A letter arrived in my mailbox 2 weeks later. Not from Karen, not from the HOA, but from her lawyer. A civil suit. She was claiming emotional distress, defamation, and property damage to her BMW during towing. I smiled, folded the letter, and set it aside. Because I already had a counterclaim ready. And this time, I wouldn't just defend myself. I'd finish the war she started. The lawsuit didn't surprise me. It was the natural next move for someone like Karen. When her weapons of gossip and authority failed, she turned to litigation, hoping to bury me in paperwork the same way she'd tried with city inspectors. The complaint was almost artful in its absurdity. Emotional distress, malicious intent, irreparable damage to community reputation. She even claimed that I had psychologically manipulated neighbors into ostracizing her. I had to read that line twice just to appreciate the irony. Her attorney was the same young man who'd once sent me the civil damages letter months ago, the one I'd vaporized with a single email and a police report. I could only assume she was his first and only difficult client. Poor guy. I called him. "Mr. Lewis," I said cheerfully when he answered. "I see Karen's decided to waste your time again." There was a pause on the line. "Mr. Harris, I can't discuss specifics." "Oh, sure you can," I said. "Just not confidential ones. I'm assuming she's not paying you enough for the stress." He chuckled quietly before catching himself. "Look, all I can say is, good luck. She's very determined." "I've noticed," I said. "But determination doesn't win against facts." I hung up, called my own lawyer, an old friend from college named Sam, and sent him the entire file I'd been meticulously building since this circus began. HOA notices, false complaints, vandalism photos, police reports, even the footage of her midnight gas can visit. By the next morning, Sam had already drafted a response. "This won't take long," he said. "Her case is built on air. But I recommend we go on offense. Counterclaim for harassment, defamation, and malicious prosecution. You've got the evidence." I agreed. If Karen wanted a courtroom, she was getting one, with herself on the losing side. The hearing was set for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, Karen tried to regain her footing in the court of public opinion. She started posting cryptic messages on the neighborhood Facebook group. "Some people can't stand strong women," and "Truth always comes out, stay tuned." But every post backfired. The comments were merciless. One neighbor replied, "Strong women don't vandalize garages, Karen." Another said, "You literally called the cops on a gas can, stop playing the victim." Her replies got progressively more defensive until finally, the admin muted her account. Even her allies had vanished. The few residents who used to side with her for convenience now avoided eye contact. When I passed her on the street, she didn't glare anymore. She just looked hollow, like someone realizing the stage lights were gone and the audience had left. Still, she wasn't done fighting. The night before the court date, I saw her out front polishing her BMW. She'd finally gotten it back from impound, looking pristine again. She caught me watching and shouted, "Hope you're ready to lose everything tomorrow." I smiled. "That's what I said to your mechanic when he sent me your repair bill." Her face twisted and she stormed inside. The courthouse was a plain brick building downtown, with all the charm of a DMV waiting room. I arrived early with Sam, who wore his usual calm half-smile, the look of a man who'd already done the math and knew how this would end. Karen arrived late, flanked by her attorney and carrying another one of her infamous binders. She looked immaculate, every hair in place, every movement rehearsed. She sat at the plaintiff's table and immediately began rearranging her documents like she was preparing for a presidential debate. When the judge entered, the room hushed. He was an older man, glasses perched low, voice gravelly but sharp. "We're here for Parker versus Harris," he began. "Ms. Parker, you may proceed." Karen stood, posture rigid. "Your Honor, I've endured months of targeted harassment, humiliation, and property damage at the hands of my neighbor. He's turned the community against me, posted false accusations online, and even collaborated with HOA officials to remove me from my elected position." "Elected?" the judge asked. She hesitated. "Well, appointed, technically." He nodded slowly. "Proceed." She launched into a long, emotional speech, complete with trembling voice and dramatic pauses. She mentioned her trauma, her fear, and how she could no longer enjoy her home without feeling unsafe. She even pulled out printed screenshots of neighborhood gossip, claiming they were defamatory campaigns orchestrated by me. When she finally sat down, visibly proud of her performance, the judge turned to my lawyer. "Mr. Collins?" Sam stood calmly. "Thank you, Your Honor. We'll be brief." He handed over a thick binder, mine. Exhibits a through M police reports, city inspection records, and a video recording of Ms. Parker trespassing on my client's property with a gasoline container at midnight. Karen's expression froze. Sam continued, "You'll also find correspondence from the city confirming multiple false complaints filed under her name, as well as a statement from the HOA documenting her suspension due to misconduct." The judge flipped through the documents silently. Then he asked, "Ms. Parker, is any of this incorrect?" Karen stammered. "Those reports are exaggerated. He provoked me." "By building a garage?" Sam asked politely. Her lawyer sighed. "Your Honor, my client." The judge held up a hand. "I've seen enough. This is not harassment. It's the result of your client's actions. The case is dismissed with prejudice." Karen's mouth fell open. "You can't." "I can," the judge said flatly. "And I strongly advise against any further litigation unless you enjoy paying attorney fees for both sides." He turned to Sam. "Mr. Harris, your counterclaim for harassment and defamation is well supported. I'm forwarding it to mediation for damages." Karen turned pale. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to evaporate. Outside the courtroom, she stormed up to me, voice trembling. "You think you've won? You've destroyed my life." "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself. I just kept the receipts." Sam put a hand on my shoulder and steered me away. "Let her shout," he murmured. "It's the only thing she has left." The mediation was quick. She settled, quietly, privately, for a modest sum that mostly covered my legal fees. But the real victory wasn't the money. It was the silence that followed. No more letters. No more inspectors. No more drama. Or so I thought. A month later, just when life felt normal again, I got a call from Roger. "Hey," he said, sounding hesitant. "You might want to see this." He sent me a photo, a for sale sign on Karen's lawn. Beneath it, Estate sale, all items must go. She was leaving. When I drove past later, I saw her house half empty, boxes stacked in the driveway. She stood out front with a realtor, her trademark confidence gone. She looked smaller somehow, deflated. She glanced at me once, not with hatred, but something stranger. Resignation. Maybe even regret. I nodded politely. She looked away. For a week, I thought that was the end. Then came one last twist. The morning before the moving trucks arrived, I noticed something on my driveway, an envelope under my windshield wiper. Inside was a handwritten note. "You're not the villain I thought you were. I wanted to control everything because I was scared of losing what I had. I lost it anyway. Maybe that's fair. Don't worry. You won't hear from me again. Karen." For a long moment, I just stood there, reading it over and over. The handwriting was steady, the tone almost peaceful. It didn't erase the chaos she'd caused, but it humanized her in a way I hadn't expected. Entitlement often hides insecurity, and Karen had built her life on control because control was the only thing she understood. That afternoon, her BMW rolled out of the neighborhood for the last time. The sound of its engine fading down the street felt like the final page of a long, exhausting chapter. But life has a way of rewarding patience. A few weeks later, the HLA held elections to fill the vacant vice president seat. Roger asked if I'd consider running. I laughed. "You want me on the board?" "After all this," he smiled. "You're organized, calm under fire, and know every bylaw better than anyone. We could use someone who knows how to handle chaos." I thought about it, about turning the space Karen had once ruled into something fair, balanced, even useful. "Fine," I said. "But I'm skipping the monthly gossip meetings." He laughed. "Deal." When the vote came in, I won unanimously. Not because I campaigned, because the neighborhood was tired of fear. They wanted normalcy, peace, and accountability. That weekend, I walked into the same HOA office where Karen once held her little court of power. The same seat, the same table. But where she'd stacked binders full of fabricated grievances, I placed a single folder labeled Actual Issues. As I looked out the window, I caught sight of my rebuilt garage, sunlight glinting off the smooth paint, doors rolling up perfectly. It had survived storms, investigations, vandalism, and absurd drama. It was, in a way, a monument to endurance, and for the first time since all of this began, I felt something I hadn't in months: peace. But the story wasn't quite done yet. Because 3 weeks later, I received an anonymous tip in my HOA inbox. Someone claimed there were strange noises coming from the woods behind my property at night. I almost laughed, until I checked my cameras again. And what I saw made my stomach drop. A figure, dressed in dark clothes, standing near the edge of the trees, watching my house. The shape was too far to identify clearly, but the outline, the posture, the way the person tilted their head, it looked hauntingly familiar. Karen might have left the neighborhood, but apparently she hadn't left me. That night, I didn't sleep much. The footage replayed in my mind on a loop. The still silhouette at the edge of the trees, motionless, just watching. I told myself it could have been anything. A hiker, a kid cutting through the property line, even a trick of the light. But deep down, I knew. There was something unmistakable about that posture, that rigid, defiant stance. It was Karen's silhouette, burned into my brain after months of confrontation. By morning, I'd already pulled the footage into my laptop and enhanced it frame by frame. The figure stood there for nearly 8 minutes, never moving closer, never turning away. Then, at 12:43 a.m., it vanished, slipping back into the darkness as if melting into the forest. No car, no flashlight, no sound. I called the sheriff's department. The same deputy who'd handled her previous arrest came by, a tall, patient man named Weaver. He stood in my living room, arms crossed, watching the footage carefully. He finally said, "Could be her. Hard to tell. She's technically out on probation, restraining orders still in effect." "Still active," I said. "Expires next month." He nodded. I'll file a report, send a patrol by tonight. If it happens again, we'll set up a motion sensor alarm near the tree line. I thanked him, but I could already see the doubt in his eyes. Without a clear face, it was speculation. And speculation didn't hold up in court. That evening, I installed new cameras, 3 of them, pointed directly at the woods. I added floodlights that triggered when motion lasted more than 3 seconds. The technology gave me a sense of control, but emotionally, I felt the unease return. Karen had spent months trying to make me feel off balance, and somehow, even after losing everything, she'd found a way to do it again, just by standing there. The next night, around the same time, the motion alert pinged again. I bolted upright, heart pounding, and opened the feed. Nothing. Just the breeze moving through trees, a faint shimmer of leaves. But then, a flicker. A single frame showing the same figure, closer this time, half obscured by a tree. I walked to the back porch quietly, staying in the shadows. The woods loomed silent, a wall of black beyond my property lights. For a long minute, I stood there, listening. Then, snap, a twig broke. My skin prickled. Karen, I said, my voice steady. If that's you, turn around and leave. No answer. Just the whisper of wind. I stayed up the rest of the night, lights on, cameras recording. Nothing else moved. The following morning, Roger stopped by. You look like hell, he said, half joking. Thanks. I might have a stalker again. His expression turned serious. I showed him the footage. He frowned. You think she came back? I don't think. I know. He leaned closer to the screen. Man. I didn't think she'd risk violating the restraining order. Karen doesn't do logic, I said. He rubbed his chin. You want me to bring this to the board? We can have private security patrol for a week. No, I said. I don't want her to think she's scaring me. But she was. That evening, I took a walk down the block just to clear my head. The air was cool, heavy with the smell of pine and distant rain. When I passed Karen's old house, it looked abandoned, no lights, no sound, just the faint echo of emptiness. A realtor's lockbox still hung on the doorknob, swinging slightly in the wind. As I walked back, I noticed something odd, a parked sedan halfway down the street. Windows tinted, engine off. The kind of car you don't notice until you realize it hasn't moved for days. When I got closer, I saw something on the dashboard, a sun visor card from a private investigations firm. My stomach sank. I called the number printed on it. A woman's voice answered briskly, Crosswind Investigations. I said, Hi, this is Daniel Harris. I live on Lakeside Drive. One of your cars is parked on my street. Can I ask why? There was a pause. Mr. Harris, we can't discuss client information. So you're watching me? Not you, sir. We're observing activity related to an open case. Please don't approach the vehicle. She hung up before I could say more. I stared at the car for a long moment, realization dawning. Karen had hired a private investigator. She wasn't just haunting me, she was building something again, maybe some last-ditch attempt to gather evidence for another legal stunt. That night, the car was gone. But the cameras caught movement again. This time, not just one figure. 2. One standing near the woods, another crouched low near my fence line, using a flashlight. I called Weaver immediately. He arrived in under 10 minutes, lights off, quiet as a ghost. Together, we combed the property. They were gone by the time we reached the tree line, but we found footprints, deep impressions in the soft dirt, one larger, one smaller. He radioed for backup. Looks like she's back, and she's not alone, he said grimly. We set up a proper motion perimeter that night, infrared sensors, noise alarms, even a marked patrol car parked discreetly 2 streets over. The sheriff's department took it seriously now. Karen had a record, and this crossed into stalking territory. But when the next alert came, it wasn't her. At 1:17 a.m., my camera caught the second figure again. Male, taller, moving with practiced ease. He wasn't trespassing. He was surveilling. He adjusted something near my property corner, then disappeared into the trees. The deputies found what he'd planted the next morning. A small, battery-powered camera hidden in a birdhouse, lens pointed directly at my garage. "Private surveillance," Weaver said, shaking his head. "Looks professional. Not her work. But she probably hired whoever did." He bagged it as evidence, then looked at me. "She's escalating again, but now she's outsourcing. That's bad news." He wasn't wrong. Karen had gone from meddling HOA tyrant to criminal opportunist. 2 days later, Sam called with new information. "You're not gonna like this," he said. "Karen's filed another complaint, this time with the county zoning board. She's claiming your property line extends into conservation land." I laughed, exasperated. "That's impossible. I have the survey." "She knows that," Sam said. "But she's using the complaint to justify a new investigation. It buys her access to records and the right to send her investigator near your property." "She's using the law to spy on me again," I said quietly. "She's desperate," he replied. "But every move she makes now leaves a trail." He was right. And I was done reacting. That evening, I drafted my own plan. I reached out to a friend in the local news business, the same reporter who'd covered the initial HOA scandal. I gave her everything: the restraining order, the police reports, the surveillance footage. She loved it. "HOA tyrant turned stalker?" she said. "That's a story people will eat alive." I told her to hold it for now. I wanted Karen to feel safe before I pulled the rug out. That night, I saw the car again, the same one from before. This time, I didn't call the investigator's number. I walked straight toward it. The driver's window rolled down halfway, revealing a young man in sunglasses. "Evening," I said. He stayed silent. "Tell Karen," I continued, "that the next time she sends someone here, they'll be walking into a police sting." He smirked faintly. "You think she's scared of you?" "No," I said. "She's scared of losing control. And she already has." He rolled the window up and drove off. That weekend, I called the sheriff's office again and requested a formal trespass warrant. Weaver helped me file it. "Once it's active," he said, "any private investigator working for her can be detained for harassment." By Sunday, the woods were quiet again. No figures, no lights, no cars. For the first time in days, I exhaled. But peace in this story never lasted long. Monday morning, a certified letter arrived. From Karen. Inside was a single photograph, printed from one of my own camera feed. The angle showed me standing on my porch at night, staring into the darkness. On the back, written in neat cursive, were 3 words. "Still watching you." I stared at it for a long time, my pulse pounding. Then I noticed something else. A faint reflection in the window behind me in the photo, a shadowy figure holding a phone. The timestamp matched the night she'd first appeared in the woods. I handed the photo to Weaver later that day. He studied it carefully, then looked at me. "This is solid. Between this, the PI, and her note, we've got enough to press stalking charges." He paused, then asked, "You sure you want to go through with this? If we arrest her again, it'll get messy." I nodded. "She's been making it messy since the day she parked in my garage." That night, Weaver and his team set up plainclothes surveillance around my house. I didn't sleep. Every creak of wood sounded amplified, every rustle in the woods felt personal. At 2:04 a.m., the motion alarms triggered. The cameras lit up. There she was, stepping out of the tree-line in a black hoodie, holding her phone, scanning the house. The deputies moved in instantly, lights flashing, voices sharp. She froze like a cornered animal. When they cuffed her this time, she didn't yell or resist. She just stared at me through the floodlight glare, eyes hollow. "I just wanted to see it again," she said quietly. "The garage. The one thing I couldn't take from you." They led her away, and for once I didn't feel vindicated, just exhausted. Watching her disappear into the back of the cruiser, I realized the war was finally over. But Karen's ghost would linger. Every night, when I looked out the window toward the trees, I half expected to see that silhouette again. Not out of fear anymore, just habit. Some scars don't fade. They just stop bleeding. And for the first time in months, the only sound I heard was silence. The kind of silence that, finally, meant peace. When Karen was finally taken away that night, the air outside felt cleaner, lighter, like the neighborhood itself had exhaled for the first time in months. The patrol cars idled in the distance, their red and blue lights washing over the trees, flickering like a warning flare to anyone still watching. Weaver came over, clipboard in hand, and gave me that look, a mix of fatigue and quiet satisfaction. "She's in custody," he said simply. "Violation of a restraining order, stalking, and trespassing. DA's office wants to move fast this time." I nodded, too tired to smile. "Doesn't even feel real," I admitted. Weaver glanced back toward the patrol car where Karen sat, small and motionless in the back seat. "4 people like her," he said, "controls an addiction. Losing it breaks them." He was right. When the car finally drove away, the neighborhood lights began flicking on one by one, as if everyone had been waiting for confirmation that the storm was truly over. Mark came jogging across the street barefoot, coffee mug in hand. "Was that?" "Yeah," I said. "It's over." He let out a low whistle. "Man, you've been living in a Netflix show." I laughed for the first time in a long while, the kind of laugh that feels rusty but real. "Yeah," I said. "Season finale. But the thing about finales is, they always leave loose ends." Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood returned to a kind of cautious normal. The HOA, newly humble after watching its vice president implode, became cooperative for once. Roger stepped down, saying he wanted a break from the madness, and the board unanimously asked me to stay on as acting president. At first, I refused. The title felt cursed. But then I realized, maybe the best way to protect this place from another Karen was to make sure the rules actually worked for people instead of against them. So I accepted, on one condition, that we rewrite the community charter. I spent the next month poring over every paragraph, every vague clause Karen had exploited. We rewrote them to close loopholes, protect homeowners from harassment, and limit HOA authority. When the new charter passed, the applause at the community meeting felt different, less like a formality, more like relief. "Finally," Mark said afterward, clapping me on the shoulder, "you turned the monster she built into something decent." "Poetic justice," I said. "In very boring paperwork form." We both laughed. The sheriff's office, meanwhile, built its case. Weaver called once a week with updates. Karen's bail hearing postponed twice. Her lawyer had tried to argue mental distress and temporary psychosis, but the evidence, the cameras, the letters, the investigator, everything was overwhelming. "She's facing real time this round," Weaver said. "Misdemeanors stacked high enough to touch felony territory." I didn't celebrate. I didn't even feel anger anymore, just a kind of cold empathy. Karen wasn't a villain out of spite. She was one out of fear. The fear of irrelevance, of losing her grip on a world she once commanded. When she realized she couldn't win through charm or intimidation, she turned to destruction. But destruction consumes both sides eventually. About a month later, I received a letter, not from Karen this time, but from her sister. The envelope was plain, postmarked from a neighboring state. Inside was a short handwritten note. "Mr. Harris, I'm writing because my sister has been placed in a treatment facility pending her hearing. I don't ask for sympathy, but I wanted you to know she's getting help. She admitted to everything. Said she couldn't stop herself. Said you were the only one who never screamed at her, and that's what made her hate you most. Laura Parker." I must have read that line 10 times, the only one who never screamed at her. It stuck with me. Maybe that's what broke her in the end, the fact that I refused to play her game. I folded the letter, put it in the same binder where I kept all the evidence, and closed it for good. Summer arrived slowly that year. The lake thawed, the lawns greened, and the sound of kids on bikes replaced the tension that had once filled the air. My garage door lifted smoothly every morning, sunlight spilling across the clean concrete. It no longer felt like a battleground, just a space again. One Saturday, I was outside washing my truck when Mark came by with a beer. "You ever think about selling this place?" he asked. I shook my head. "This house has been through too much to hand it off now." He grinned. "You sound like it's a war veteran." "In a way, it is." We sat in the driveway, talking about everything except Karen, until Mark, inevitably, couldn't resist. "You ever wonder what really started it? Like, the first spark?" I thought about that for a moment. "Control," I said finally. "People like her build their identity around it. Then someone comes along who doesn't obey the script, and suddenly, they can't breathe." He nodded. "You broke her system." "She tried to break me first," I said. "All I did was survive it." The final twist came 6 months later. The court ruled officially. Karen was guilty on all charges but granted leniency due to her psychological state. She was sentenced to probation and mandatory therapy, forbidden from contacting me or any HOA member ever again. The story even made a small local headline: HOA Vice President convicted in harassment case. It was surreal seeing her name in print one last time. Beneath the headline, a small photo, her mugshot, looked like a ghost of the person she used to be. The camera hadn't captured her rage or vanity, just emptiness. I thought that would be the end. But life has a habit of giving you one last test after every storm. It came one autumn morning when I opened my mailbox and found another letter. No name, no return address. For a second, my stomach twisted. But when I opened it, I saw a single photo inside. It was my garage, bathed in morning light, doors wide open. The photo was new, taken recently, but not threatening. On the back, scrawled in faint pen, were the words, "Still standing." No signature. No message. But I knew. Karen had sent it, or maybe her sister on her behalf. And strangely, I didn't feel anger or fear. Just closure. The photo wasn't a threat, it was acknowledgement. A final, quiet surrender. I placed it in the binder with the others, the one labeled Karen Saga, and then locked it in the cabinet. Time to move forward. 2 years later, the neighborhood looked unrecognizable. We'd repainted the HOA office, started a yearly block party, and even turned Karen's old house into a community garden after it was sold to the city. People joked that it was the ultimate karmic project, turning the home of chaos into a place that grew things instead of destroying them. At the first garden opening, Roger, retired but still around, gave a short speech. "This community went through hell," he said. "But sometimes that's how you burn away the nonsense. We're better now because we learned what happens when power goes unchecked." He looked at me then. And because someone refused to bow to it. Everyone clapped, but I just smiled quietly. I wasn't the hero. I'd just been the one too stubborn to give up. That night, as the party wound down, I walked to the lake behind the neighborhood. The air was cool, the surface calm enough to reflect the stars. From here, I could see the faint outline of my garage on the hill, still perfectly intact. For the first time, I realized how much of my life had revolved around that building. It started as a project, became a battlefield, then a symbol of resilience. Karen had tried to claim it, destroy it, define it, but in the end it stood because I didn't let her. I'd rebuilt it once out of necessity. But surviving her had rebuilt me. Maybe that was the real story. Not the feud, not the drama, but what happens when someone refuses to let someone else's chaos rewrite their piece. I stood there for a long while, listening to the soft hum of crickets, the faint wind brushing the trees. No motion sensors, no alarms, no fear. Just quiet. Then I went home, parked my truck in the garage, and hit the close button. The door glided down smoothly, sealing the space in a gentle hush. For the first time, it felt final. Months later, I was sitting on my porch when the mail carrier handed me an envelope with a government seal. It was from the Department of Community Affairs, a standard audit notice for HOA funds. but tucked inside was a handwritten note from the case officer, someone who'd apparently followed my saga through local news. Mr. Harris, I reviewed your case while auditing HOA management files. Just wanted to say, it's rare to see someone take on a system like that and come out cleaner than they went in. You turned chaos into accountability. Well done. I smiled at that. Maybe closure doesn't come in grand moments, it comes in small ones, like a note from a stranger who sees what you went through and calls it what it was: endurance. Later that evening, as the sun set, I walked out to my driveway one last time and looked at the quiet street, the gardens blooming where battles once raged, the homes glowing softly with porch lights. It was peaceful now, not because there were no more Karens in the world, but because I'd learned how to face them. Calmly. Methodically. Without losing myself. The wind rustled the trees by the property line, the same trees where I'd once seen her shadow. But this time, it wasn't menacing. It was just the sound of leaves. I took a deep breath, smiled to myself, and went inside. And as the garage door closed behind me, steady, smooth, and quiet, I knew the story was truly over. The garage still stood. I still stood. And that was enough.